Hello and welcome, I'm Thomas Porteous and you're watching NewsX World. Let's take a look at some of the top stories. The United Kingdom and 27 other nations have urged an immediate end to the war in Gaza, condemning Israel's aid blockades and civilian deaths. Israel responds and calls the statement disconnected from reality. Local health authorities report that at least 12 Palestinians were killed and dozens wounded by Israeli tank shells fired at tents housing displaced families in Gaza City. The strike occurred north of Shati refugee camp. Ukrainian President Zelensky says fresh peace talks with Russia will begin on Wednesday in Turkey, the first in nearly 2 months. The Kremlin says both sides still hold diametrically opposed positions. The death toll rises to 27 in the Bangladesh Air Force trainer crash, according to the Special Assistant to the Chief Advisor for Health. This plane slammed into a school and college in Dhaka, leaving dozens more injured and hospitalized with burns. The US Justice Department has released over 240,000 pages of documents on Martin Luther King Jr.'s 1968 assassination. The files include FBI records detailing surveillance and efforts to discredit the civil rights leader. Brett Hankinson has been sentenced to 33 months in prison for violating Breonna Taylor's civil rights in a deadly raid back in 2020. He is the only officer convicted in connection with the high-profile police killing. Iran says it will not abandon uranium enrichment despite severe damage from recent US airstrikes on its nuclear facilities. Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi said enrichment is halted for now, but remains a matter of national pride as talks with Europe resume Friday in Istanbul. The Israeli military says it has intercepted a missile launch from Yemen, triggering sirens across several regions. The strike follows Israel's Monday attack on Houthi targets in Hodeidah as tensions escalate with the Iran-backed group. Now, our top story today. United Nations Secretary-General Antonio Guterres has called for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza. He also condemned the killings on Gazans at aid sites. Let's listen in to what he had to say at the UN General Assembly.
Over the weekend in Gaza, we saw yet more mass shootings and killings of people seeking UN aid for their families. An atrocious and inhumane act which I utterly condemn. We need an immediate ceasefire in Gaza, the immediate release of all hostages, and unimpeded humanitarian access as a first step to achieve.
According to the United Nations spokesperson for the Secretary-General of the UN, Stefan Dujarric, Guterres said the last lifelines keeping people alive in Gaza are collapsing and the humanitarian system is being impeded, undermined and endangered. His spokesperson further added that Guterres deplored rising cases of malnutrition among children and adults and says Israel has a legal obligation to facilitate aid. He reiterated that UN premises must be respected and civilians must never be targeted. Let's listen in to Jurac's comments.
And as you are well aware, over the weekend, Israeli military issued another displacement order in al-balah, spanning 4 neighborhoods. Our colleagues, our humanitarian affairs colleagues, warned that the mass displacement order has dealt yet another devastating blow to the already fragile lifeline keeping people alive across the Gaza.
We're now joined by retired Major General Sadat Karji, who's a senior geopolitical and strategic defense expert. Thank you very much, Major General, for joining us on the program. These United Nations statements come after we saw a letter of over 27 countries, including the United Kingdom, France, Australia, among many others, condemn some of Israel's actions, particularly the blockade of aid and the number of civilian deaths. What's the significance behind these words, Major General?
Thomas, good morning. Thank you for getting me to your show in NewsX World. I must
Pleasure.
compliment the channel for flagging the issue. And this particular episode is highly deplorable, and I would commend these 27 countries for having come together, impressed upon the global body to ensure immediate ceasefire, because there is no question, there is no scope of prohibiting the humanitarian aid going as a bottom line requirement for the survival of the people in Gaza. I do not see any rationale and logic as to why Netanyahu has to give orders to perpetrate these kind of war crimes when people are virtually dying. They are eating, trying to take out the floor from the sand. It was a very, very painful sight through the optics that actually was going around in the social media. So therefore, I see a lot of meaning. I think it's about time the entire world must come together in a global organization like United Nations Security Council and the General Assembly and put pressure on Israel to stop this mindless conflict and bring mayhem to the innocent civilians and deny them the basic humanitarian relief which is being extended as a last line of survival. Back to you, Thomas.
Major General G, do you think Israel is at real risk here of becoming a rogue state, as we've just seen as this international condemnation has started a commencement of a new ground operation in the center of Gaza, which is actually where in Israeli intelligence says there's a real possibility of where the hostages are meant to be being held. This is a region where the Israelis have kept away from conflict throughout this entire time, and we see refugees there, and also the real risk of endangering the hostages. What are your thoughts?
I do appreciate you always come out with very brilliant and sharp questions. This is one of them, and I do agree. Between the hostages who are yet to be released by the Hamas and the relief operation, I think we need to draw a very distinct line. On one hand, you have people who are dying because of lack of survival material. The other hand, you have hostages for which there has to be an ongoing and persistent, relentless negotiation with the stakeholders. I really don't know what is happening. Why is it taking so much of time? But to have one particular issue and action hostage for the reasons of others, I do not see any logic in this. There are two different issues, and survival of people and their requirement needs to be delinked from making the hostages free from the clutches of the Hamas. And Hamas needs to be addressed in a different quarter. For that, military is not the only solution. We need to have very substantive, meaningful, and penetrative dialogue to secure early release of the hostages from the clutches of Hamas. Back to you.
Yes, and one name that we didn't see on this list of countries, of course, is Israel's, some would say, greatest ally, the United States. Donald Trump has been vocal about this issue, once saying that he wants to turn Gaza into the Riviera of the Middle East. How do you think the US president is going to take this statement, joint statement, from some of its closest allies? I mean, particularly with this tariff deadline looming. What are your thoughts?
Oh, well, Thomas, somehow, you see, it's almost close to now 5-6 months post his assumption of Trump 2.0 as president, second tenure as a president of USA. I personally feel each one has got the freedom and liberty to work as a leader. There are some commitments which Donald Trump has made to the constituency of USA. Whether he lives up to the commitment or not, it's a tall order. Now, coming to the specific question that you are asking, I personally feel that these are all daydreams. Turning Gaza into a kind of a Riviera is a pipe dream as far as I am concerned. There are very serious and complex issues. I am mindful of the fact that there was an agreement. It's a classified secret or top secret document if I recall correctly, Clean Break is the name of the document, in which there is no existence or space for the Palestinians in the Middle East. And that theory somehow has caught the attention of the leadership of the USA without publicizing the thing. They have been playing to the gallery so as to fulfill the parameters and the agenda hidden in that document. Netanyahu is part of our deep state, I would say. Therefore, to comment on Donald Trump's pipe dream of turning or converting Gaza into a Rivera is a thing should not be accepted in 21st century in this so-called liberal-based international order. I personally feel the way tariffs, behavior or comments on Gaza or other issues, attacking Iran on nuclear installations, while he had made a promise to his people and the international order that he won't do anything which will trigger new conflicts in the world, he will bring down or close the Russia-Ukraine war within 24 hours, Hamas and Israel within a reasonable time. Contrary to all these assumptions and commitment that he has made, I'm afraid that instead of liberal-based international order, he is working towards a liberal-based international disorder. This I will say with a lot of conviction as a student of geopolitics, that this is not on in 21st century. It's about time he introspects with the help of his advisors. Is he doing the right thing? Therefore, Netanyahu is not the man who is to be blamed entirely. There is a superpower behind Netanyahu who is perpetrating these crimes and debarring the provision of humanitarian assistance which are being extended to the Gaza people.
Yes, Major General, you are staying with us. We have further updates from the Gaza Strip. At least 12 Palestinians have been killed and dozens more wounded after Israeli tank shelling struck a tent encampment housing displaced families in western Gaza City, north of the enclave. Medics said that tanks were stationed north of the Shati camp and fired 2 shells at the tents. There has been no immediate response from the Israeli military regarding the incident. We are once again joined by Major General G to discuss this further. Major General, the IDF has always maintained that it is calculated and that it is as precise as it can be. It cites difficulty in a densely populated area, but when you hear a story like this, a tank firing shells at displaced families' tents, what are your thoughts? Do you think that this response by the Israeli Defense Forces is as proportionate as they claim to be?
Certainly not, Thomas. You have raised another very important issue in dealing with civilians during conflict. All the militaries all over the world, we are taught the basic tenets and principles of military science, application of minimum force. So towards the question that you have raised, I definitely personally feel that it is out of proportion and should not be resorted to. This would actually compel the people sitting in the higher hierarchy in the International Apex Organization to put this under the brand heading of, I would say, international war crime. This is not acceptable in any kind of conflict. And I personally feel Netanyahu has created multiple fronts, whether it is the Yemen or Iran or Hezbollah side or Hamas, and lots of militia in between. He is actually switching from one front to another so as to keep his tenure tenable as a Prime Minister of Israel. Otherwise, he is going to be behind bars very soon. There are too many critical and criminal cases against him in the judiciary of Israel. If he is subjected to fair trial, perhaps he is heading for those kinds of imprisonment, maybe lifelong, some of them. So therefore, in order best way to actually remain out of these kind of dangerous threats which are looming large on him and his future, perhaps extending the conflict in whatever form beyond proportion or within proportion, perhaps is one of the options as per him. As per me as a student of geopolitics, I definitely feel that these are war crimes. They should be penalized appropriately. International pressure must be put on Netanyahu and Donald Trump to bring some sanity and some kind of rationality to this particular act of horror. Back to you, Thomas.
Major General, do stay with us. We have another related development. Palestinian Prime Minister Mohammed Mustafa called on the international community to take immediate action to end Israel's starvation campaign in the Gaza Strip, warning that famine is putting hundreds of children and civilians at imminent risk. Speaking in Ramallah alongside UN agency officials, here's what he said.
تواصل إسرائيل استخدام التجويع كسلاح حرب، بما في ذلك قتل أكثر من 995 فلسطيني من منتظري المساعدات من مصائد الموت التي نصبوها. وكما حذر المسؤول الأممي توم فليتشر، يجب ألا يقابل الجوع بالرصاص. Without immediate large-scale humanitarian access, Gaza risks a catastrophic descent into famine, chaos, and further mass loss of life.
He further stressed that Israel was legally obligated under international law to ensure access to food, medicine and essentials, a responsibility he said was being systemically violated. Mustafa urged world governments to pressure Israel to fully open Gaza's crossings for unrestricted humanitarian delivery, including food, medicine and fuel. According to Gaza's health ministry, 86 people, including 76 children, have died from hunger and dehydration since October of 2023. Mustafa called for immediate intervention to prevent further atrocities. We're once again joined by Major General G. Major General, this statement comes as we've seen this statement from 27 countries saying that they will go further if this war in Gaza doesn't come to an end. Is that too late for the region? Are international communities doing enough? And we're talking about some of Israel's closest allies here in the West, in Europe, and even in North America and Australia. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, but again, Thomas, a very relevant question you have. In response, I would say better late than never. You see, for you and me or anybody who doesn't know the real problem which is threatening the existence of Israel would think the same way. Israel also has got a counter response and counter interpretation to everything. We may not be able to match their level of understanding and interpretation. But I personally feel, being a student again of geopolitics, having monitoring all the activities, almost everything in the Middle East, I think the timeline has been crossed by Israel. It's about time to put a stop to all these conflict, kinetic kind of component of the warfare and bring diplomacy and dialogue to the table and look at things with compassion. Perhaps to my mind, what kinetic component cannot give, his basic aim is to get the hostages back. If hostages have to be taken back, you need not resort to mindless kind of mayhem against the populace which doesn't have food, it doesn't have fuel, doesn't have medicine, doesn't have clothes, and they're dying. I saw a couple of pictorials as also a tinker in your channel, which says the weaponizing the hunger. This is a beautiful term that the channel has chosen. You have actually weaponized the hunger in such a manner that it has never been witnessed. In the worst of situation in Second World War, the hunger was never weaponized. And let Israel not go down the times of history and the legacy of the world order to be remembered as weaponization of hunger is being one of the weapons which is being used by Israel against the innocent civilians. It is never done. The timeline is gone far, far long back. It's about time that he puts some logic into his action and carry out some meaningful, substantive, maybe out-of-the-box kind of negotiation stance to get his hostages back from the Hamas. Back to you, Thomas.
Yes, Major General, do stay with us. For our next story, we stay in West Asia, where in southern Syria, over 1,260 people were killed in sectarian violence before a recent ceasefire took effect. The latest toll, reported by a war monitor, covers clashes in Sawida province. Among the dead were 505 Druze fighters, 298 Druze civilians, including 194 allegedly executed by Syrian forces. The report also counts 408 government security personnel killed, along with 35 Sunni Bedouins, 3 of whom were executed by Druze fighters. Meanwhile, US President Donald Trump was caught off guard by Israel's recent strikes in Syria. According to the White House, Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt said Trump quickly called Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to address the issue. Let's take a listen in to what the White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt said.
He was caught off guard by the bombing in Syria and also the bombing of a Catholic church in Gaza, which, as you know, I addressed at my briefing last week. And in both accounts, the president quickly called the prime minister to rectify those situations.
We're once again joined by Major General G. Major General, let's first start with the violence itself. This is a fragile ceasefire. People are warning that this could cause another regional conflict if this ceasefire was going to break. What are your thoughts now this ceasefire is in place between Israel and Syria of the future of the region and the broader future of also interim al-Shara's government and how it's going so far?
In short, if I have to respond to your query, the future is very, very grim, dangerous, and going to be very hostile. And you see, Syria as a country is actually got a complex society, and it has got historical legacy issues which may be very complicated for people to understand. And here is a case, Syria, where the ceasefire somehow or the other had been put in place, but it is so fragile. There are so many invisible issues. Now the Druze issues has come up, Bedouin issues is coming up, on silly and minor issues. When I was checking up on the open source, I found that this new conflict between the Druze and the Bedouin has actually taken place because of a vegetable vendor, a merchant. He being checked and subjected to avoidable physical assault. So that is, on one hand you have Shiite Muslims, the other hand you have got the Sunni Muslims. So and your Turkey is interested in its pie of flesh, in a pound of flesh it wants to enjoy, and you have the north of Iraq as it is. Those tribes are already there. The basic aim, as I understand, is that USA is gaining a lot by keeping the area under active hostilities, and it's gaining so much because Syria has got abundance of oil, and therefore USA has got its selfish interest, and in order to benefit and derive maximum economic leverage, the hostility, ongoing hostility in a way is being taken, perhaps is being assumed as a boot, which I personally feel is highly dangerous. And the international order has to take notice of this particular challenge, bring some kind of a peace and harmony to the area. Otherwise, entire Middle East all together, be it Iraq, Syria, Jordan or Iran, all of them will be burning. The whole world order is going to be subjected to some kind of imbalance. Instead of order, we'll continue to witness disorder in times ahead.
Yes, Major General Sudhakar G, thank you very much. Pleasure having you on the program. We now move over to Europe, where Ukraine and Russia are set to resume peace talks on July the 23rd in Turkey. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky confirmed the development in his nightly video address on Monday. He said he spoke with Rustem Umerov, head of Ukraine's National Security and Defense Council, about preparations for the next round of negotiations. Zelensky also mentioned discussions are underway for a possible prisoner exchange. Let's take a listen in to what the Ukrainian president said.
It's very simple. Prime Minister Carney in Canada caved to President Trump in the United States of America, and President Trump knows how.
Сьогодні я обговорив з Рустемом Умєровим підготовку обміну та ще однієї зустрічі в Туреччині з російською стороною. Умєров доповів, що зустріч планується на середу. Завтра буде більше деталей.
Meanwhile, Umerov, who led the first round of talks with Russia, will represent Ukraine once again. Further details on the meeting are expected to be announced today. We're now joined by Jim Rice, who's a professor of international law, located in Vigan, the Philippines, to discuss this further. Jim, We're now joined by Jim Rice. Apologies for that, it was a technical issue. We're now joined by Jim Rice, Professor of International Law located in Vigan, the Philippines. Jim, thank you so much, as always, for joining us on the programme. Jim, the conditions of both Russia and Ukraine, going into these third rounds of talks, it seems to have been, fighting has escalated, things in the war on the ground don't seem to couldn't be at a worse point currently. If you could, for us, explain the two differing sides right now and kind of explain to us if you have any expectations for these talks.
Thanks for having me on, Thomas. As a scholar of international law, as someone who has taught international law, very briefly, this is an illegal war. Putin illegally invaded Ukraine, a sovereign nation, in 2022, and the war has continued to this day. During this time, Putin's army has used illegal methods, including kidnapping and bringing to Russia 19,000 hostages, as compared with your last segment, has bombed civilian centers like schools and hospitals and civilian infrastructure and housing. So as for that, it's fairly simple. In terms of these negotiations, which are to occur this week, my view is that we should see this in terms of Putin's wider ambitions. And Putin is not interested in any kind of peace settlement, because if there were to be a lasting ceasefire and an end to hostilities, it would almost certainly be the end of Putin's career, if not his life. He would be through. So the only thing he can do is to continue his war of aggression. And in my mind, the observers from the West and the statespersons from the West are misreading Putin altogether. It seems to me that Putin's interests are to, first of all, invade and conquer all of Ukraine, but then go farther by dismantling the Atlantic Alliance and NATO. And he would probably continue to invade, including Poland and the Baltic states. So in my view, there is this idea of any kind of peace between Putin and Zelensky, or Russia and Ukraine, is a delusion.
Yes, Jim, please stay with us as we move on to a related development. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky confirmed the plan of peace talks after calling for faster progress in negotiations. Kyiv says discussions may also include a prisoner exchange, but the Kremlin admits both sides remain far apart on how to end the war. Meanwhile, Ukraine's foreign minister expressed doubt that Russia is willing to negotiate a ceasefire. He also said a summit involving President Zelensky, Putin, Trump and other leaders could be helpful. The last two rounds in Istanbul resulted in prisoner exchanges, but no major breakthroughs. Let's take a listen in to what Minister of Foreign Affairs for Ukraine had to say.
І дуже важливо, щоб ці зустрічі, можливість зустрічі у разі узгодження можливої дати, щоб вони були предметні, щоб інша сторона мала мандат обговорювати ті найголовніші питання: закінчення війни, досягнення перемир'я. Поки що ми цього.
We're once again joined by Jim Rice to discuss this further. Jim, the Ukrainian foreign minister has described the current situation as being a bridge too far apart for any potential breakthrough. What issues here are most likely to break the current impasse?
As far as I understand it, the only thing that can stop Putin would be if he loses. If he loses on the battlefield, or if he believes that he's gonna lose. Otherwise, Putin is going to continue to advance this illegal war in hopes that he can get the Western alliance and the United States to crumble. And so far, the Trump administration has really failed up until now, and to putting real pressure on Putin. And to this day, he hasn't done it. Trump has threatened to impose secondary sanctions in some future time, but thus far, these secondary sanctions, which haven't been tried before, haven't been implemented at all. So I believe that Putin is just going to continue to believe that he can stall Trump along and keep fighting, keep attrition on the battlefield, and hoping that the Western alliance will eventually crumble. Because he certainly doesn't have any plans to agree to any kind of peace that any civilized person would understand.
Jim Rice, I'm really sorry we have ran out of time. Thank you so much. Always a pleasure having you on the programme. Well, that is all we have time for this hour. We will continue to bring you more news updates from around the world. Thank you for joining us.